Hi there, Vaco here. In this video, I want to show you how to create this copy to clipboard sort of button that is quite common you get in different places. I'm going to show you how to do this on Webflow. You can't really do this inside Webflow's designer natively. Let me demonstrate you what I'm talking about. This is my portfolio site, and I had this button that is what email me button, and before I had this sort of linked to an email link, which is very annoying for me. Well, I hate those actually, because when you click on it, it's going to open up a email client, so that is set as your default email client on your computer. It's super annoying, and I don't know why I had it set it up, but I guess I didn't think of any other option. So I kind of got annoyed of that, and I wanted to give something to people who come to the website, something a bit easier. And one of the things that I find it very easy is when you click on a button and it just copies whatever we put inside. And in this case, it's my email. And when I put Control V, Command V, and paste, I get my email right here. So the way this button works is you click on it, some JavaScript behind does this copying inside the clipboard of the email address that I put in, and then we get this sort of notification saying that email has been copied. Now, to do this in Webflow or any other place, usually you need to use some sort of JavaScript plugin. You need to write the code yourself or use a plugin. And one of the ways that people do this by using Clipboard Js. It's a JavaScript plugin. You can install it, and well, I'll show you how to do it. You don't need to know how to code. I'm not a coder myself. I'm just a Webflow designer. We will be dealing a bit with the code, but nothing in a way that we're not going to figure it out. And also, actually, this is a good video tutorial because not just we're going to install this, but this is usually how every JavaScript plugin works when you're trying to install it on Webflow. Webflow is great, but it does have some limitations, right? And often these limitations can be met and overcome with JavaScript plugins. And usually these plugins are free, they're available on GitHub and places like that. But they're very, you get these things, and it says npm install. We don't know what that means if we are not coders, right? So the setup looks very confusing. So I'm going to take you through the setup. It's quite simple. And if once you do this, you're actually going to realize that most of these plugins work in a similar way. You pull the plugin from some JavaScript, and then you need to edit a few little steps inside, and then you'll make it work on your Webflow sites. So let's begin. So what these plugins are, this is actually quite similar to what other plugins look like. For example, there's another plugin called Typed JS. One of those things that just types, starts typing, and let me show you actually. Typed.js. If the website is the same thing. This plugin installation would be seen. So this is something that people often want to use, but you cannot do this on Webflow right away, right? Natively. So you have to install this JavaScript plugin. So once you learn how to do this here, you'll be able to follow the setup instructions of these guys as well, and then you'll just be able to do make your Webflow designing skills a lot more wider, I would say. So let me show you. So first thing we can read, and this is what usually the developer of the plugin gives as an instructions on how to install the plugin. Very frequently you'll see this. You can get they'll tell you to install it using a terminal, a command prompt inside your computer, which is like a bash or a shell. And this is what this code represents. It says, use npm install. When developers understand this, this is very easy. But for non-developers, this is very confusing. We don't understand what this means. But there is other ways to set it up. And the most common way to set it up is for us, who we don't know, especially when we are using Webflow, because we cannot do this on a Webflow site. We are not developing our site on scratch or coding it. So we need to pull the JavaScript plugin from somewhere else. And one way to do this is using, and they usually provide this, they upload the JavaScript plugin on a third-party CDN provider. CDN provider is sort of like a hosting, like a free Dropbox or a Google Drive for scripts and plugins like this. And what you can do here is when they provide this guy provided the link to where he has uploaded these things in a free CDN providers, and one of them is JS Deliver, the other one is CDN JS, and so on. This one is pretty popular, or this one as well. So I'm gonna grab this and grab the whole thing. If sometimes they'll just have this HTTPS, and pay attention to that. For us, we need this whole thing that is gonna say scripts SRS, the source of the JavaScript plugin, and ending closing tag for the script. Now what this is an HTML code that we have to put in the custom code of our website. So I'm gonna go to project settings. And we're gonna go to custom code. Now to do this, you will need a paid plan or a hosting plan because this is on a staging and free hosting. This is closed, it's not available. So to do any sort of JavaScript plugin or custom code integration inside Webflow, you will need to pay for the either hosting or for the account plan. Now what we need to do is we need to take this and we need to apply this, install it sort of to our website. And we do it from project settings. There is also a place to do it from the designer, but on the designer you do it on a per page basis. But when you do this from the project settings, this is gonna pull on every single page of your site. If you don't want it on every single page, then do it through the designer. Under the page settings, there is a code tab, and that's where you can do it. Now here we get two places to install it, either head tag or a body tag. Now if we put this in the head tag, we're gonna get this sort of recommendation from Webflow, and basically it says that if we're gonna pull some third-party JavaScript plugin, this is going to slow down our website, and that is true because what website is going to do is the browser will wait for this plugin to load all the way, and then it will start to load other HTML elements in your entire website. So it's not a good idea to put it here. Scripts usually are best to put it in the footer before the body code, because that means that entire website will load, and then this script will initialize at the very end. So it's not gonna conflict, and it's not gonna get in the way for loading and building your website HTML. So this is the first thing we need to do, to install this source code. Now sometimes this is enough, but usually it's not. There is another thing we need to do, which is we need to initialize. And when you read the instructions, it will usually tell you that you need to initiate somehow basically you need to run the code. So this plugin is pulled, but we need to put our own little code inside to say that, okay, run this code and run this code on this element. So this is one of he tells us the instructions on this and gives us the small little code that we need to put inside our Webflow as well. Now what this code says is, I don't actually understand what this code says in terms of JavaScript, but I do not understand the variable, the parameter that it has inside. And when you see something that says dot whatever, that's a class. That's what we have in our Webflow as a class. So in this case, he's saying that initiate this thing on dot button, btn. So what we're going to do is, now we cannot put this like this right here because this is an HTML. This is JavaScript code, but this is we're putting inside the HTML. And if we're going to put this like this, then HTML browser will read this as an HTML and will not really understand what's going on. So what we have to do is exactly the same thing as with this script. We need to put script and closing tag script. Opening tab looks like this, closing looks like this. Same is here, but the only difference here is that when it starts scripts, it has a source and then it ends. And there is nothing initializing here in reality. It's just telling that this is a script, but pull this script from somewhere else. And that's why it doesn't need to have anything inside. But every time you need to put some sort of JavaScript, you have to put script tags and close them into script tags. Otherwise, it's not gonna read. Now, as you can see, it started to kind of color code it the way it was color coded here, sort of similarly. Now it recognizes that it's JavaScript and it started to color code it, and that's a good thing. Now, when we do this, we're gonna come back to this, but first we're going to take a button that we want to use this on. And in this case, also just one more thing, there is different usages he has. So there is a usage where there is this input field and you copy here, and this is what going to, the button is different thing, input is different thing, and it's copying from here. But he has another input in another version, which is, and this is how most of the plugins come in. They'll give you different use examples or different ways you can use the plugin. And in my case, and this is what I wanted to do, is just one button, which is the trigger and also the element that is going to provide that email address. So as you can see, if we do this copy clipboard, it's going to copy this whatever he put here, as you can just, because you can right? So this is the one that I want to use, and he gives a specific example, specific instructions on this. Basically, he tells that we need to put the attribute data clipboard text. Now he has a different one here, data clipboard action, data clipboard target. See, so he provides different keywords, different actions for different sort of usages when we want to use. In our case, it's this one, data clipboard text. And so it's important that we copy this one. And it tells us to put this as an attribute of the trigger. Now we can put this inside Webflow, and I'll show you where you put the attribute. On any element, this can be applied, the attribute. I'm gonna do this on copy to clipboard. So I'm gonna put this on this button. Now, right now, it's just a regular button, doesn't do anything. You click on it, it's not gonna copy anything, it's empty. So we will use this button, and I'm gonna put this, when you go to the settings, you have custom attributes here. And this is where you can add this attribute that developer was providing. Name is this is the name, and the value is, in this case, for example, as you can see, this is an HTML, so this is the attribute and this is the value, whatever is going to get copied. So in our case, we're going to put my email at gmail.com. Data clipboard, that's not my real email, but so now we're going to save. Now, this is not done for one reason, which is we have installed the code and we have put this in here, but well, first of all, this one thing to note, this is not going to work on a preview mode because this is the custom code. Custom codes in Webflow will always work only in a published version. And so this is one step we did, and one final step we need to do is we need to remember that class inside that script that we have added, one line of script. Now we need to match the class of this button and the one in the script. So either we have to name this class here btn, that the way the guy had it, or we have to use my class that I have here, regular btn, and we have to put that in the code. Otherwise, the JavaScript is not going to recognize. So JavaScript needs to know which element are we going to trigger here. And so what we're going to do here is not the project set, not the dashboard, but project settings. we're going to go back to the custom code, and since I have this class, which was regular button, now this is how we are going to write it. Regular. Wherever there is space in Webflow, that space doesn't actually exist in a CSS class. It's always filled with dash. So if you have a space, write regular dash button. Save changes. Now I'm going to publish this on my staging domain so I don't update my regular website because it's already set up there. And actually, I'm going to do this from the designer so I can get to that page. Copy to clipboard. All right, so that's the page. So let's try. Now nothing shows up here because that's not part of that JavaScript plugin. This is something we are going to set it up inside Webflow ourselves, which is a good thing, which means we're just going to do the regular Webflow thing that we usually do. We're just going to design it, create an interaction, and so on. So when we click on it, hopefully, right now when I press Control V or Command V on Mac, it's going to paste that email that I have added, myemail@gmail.com. Let's try this. Copy, paste to clean. Okay, Australia. Now do this again. Paste. There you go. It works no matter how many times you do it. That's all set up. Functionality is there, but now we need to set up some sort of a tooltip so the user understands what's going on when we're clicking on this. And that's what we're going to do right inside Webflow. So let's see what we have here. So I have a nav call. It's a column inside, there's a navigator. So I have a column here and we have a button here. So what we need to do is we need to add a tooltip, which is going to be attached to the button, and it's going to position itself around button. So no matter where the button goes on the responsive size, grows, shrinks, whatever, always has to be around it. Now, the button element inside Webflow is it's like a text link, so we cannot nest anything inside of it. If this was a link block, then we would be able to put that tooltip inside of it and nest it inside, but we can't do this here. So what we need to do is we need to add a new div block, and we will put that button inside the div block with a tooltip inside, and we're gonna name this guy a tooltip tooltip, and I already have one class like that, button wrapper, and we'll add a new div block that's going to be our tooltip. Tooltip new. Tooltip. Why is this so difficult to spell? All right, so first things first, what we need to do with our tooltip button wrapper is to make sure that it's same size. So we don't want this tooltip to be changing our structure of our HTML and our structure of our site. So we don't want it to be messing with everything. Now, the way we're going to make this tooltip kind of jerk it outside of our HTML structure is to make it obsolete, make it a position obsolete. But before I do that, so it doesn't disappear, let's put some text in it. I'm double clicking on it. That's going to make it a text block. This is you also, instead of adding a div block, you can just add a regular text block. This is sort of a shortcut in Webflow. If you take a div block and double click on it, it's going to become regular text. So we will put here email copied, and now I'm going to style this guy. give it a background color. Let's change the text. All right, too big. Let's make it 14. Position in the center. Around the corners. All right, and now what we need to do is just make it 100, something like that. Yep, that should be all right. And now we will make our tooltip and position absolute. That way it's not part of the HTML structure, and it's not going to mess up anything. It's not going to create extra space. It's not going to occupy basically space. Now, when you do this, the important part is if you know how the position works, that it's always relative. The absolute position is always relative to the very first parent that is not static. So in this case, because we don't have any parent that is relative, it tells us that this tooltip is positioned and relative to the body. Now we don't want that, because when we change these positions, you'll see that it's just going around the body. And we don't want that. We want it to be relative to this guy. To make it relative to this, what we're going to do is give a position, well, give this tooltip and button wrapper a position relative. So because this tooltip and button wrapper is not based on this rule, the CSS rule, then tooltip becomes, as you can see now, it has changed. Tooltip, right? It's relative to tooltip wrapper. And we can now position it right from here. But first, what I'm going to do is probably make this tooltip button wrapper, because we don't want it to be this sort of width. I'm going to change it to, because it's right now it's set to display block. That's why it's trying to fill all the space that it's got. And instead of that, I'll make it inline block, and that way it'll just occupy whatever the content it has inside, which is the button. That's better. Now we'll style the email. Not email, but the tooltip. The way we're going to style that is perhaps position it on the bottom. Let's try to center it. Yes, that works. So it's right in the middle of the button. And yes, let's use since we set this on the bottom, when we want to change this value to make the position go up and down based on this. And I usually use pixels, because by default it's percentage, but switch to pixel, so that way it's more uniform, because our bottom is all uniform anyways, right? It doesn't really change the height. Maybe a bit more. 36 could be fine. So yeah, that's what's going to happen, right? It's going to come out like this. Email down, email copy. So that's all we need to create the tooltip. Now we need an interaction. The interaction is going to be that when I click this button, I want tooltip to appear, but we don't want it to be visible right now, right? So we want it to disappear and then appear it afterwards. We will do that right from the interactions. That's the trigger. So you're selecting the button, not the tooltip, right? Because the button is the trigger. Click plus, and obviously it's a mouse click. And from on first click, we're not going to set up anything on the second click. We're just going to set up on the first click. Start an animation. And here we're going to already have some animations here already. So we're going to create a new timed animation, name this new tooltip show. And we'll start with an action. So what's the first action we wanted to do? First, let's set up. What we're going to set up is the initial state of this tooltip. The initial state, it needs to be outside of the view, and So here, what I'm thinking here is that it's going to probably like be up like 10 pixels up on the click, then it's going to go 10 pixels down, and opacity is going to be 0%. It's going to go from 0 to 100. That's the type of animation that I'm thinking here. So that means that initial state has to be 0 opacity, 10 pixels up, and then we're going to go from there. So we'll take the opacity. Now look at this. So when you add an action, whatever you have selected here on your canvas, it's going to use that as the trigger and basically the element that we are animating. Right now it says regular button, but that's not what we want to animate, right? We want to animate the tooltip. So what you can do is right click on it and change target. Now you'll get this pink message saying that select an element on canvas and just select this tooltip. And as you can see, just make sure that it does this, and now it's tooltip new that is selected. Good. Here we're going to set this as an initial state, which is going to be 0%. Before we do that, so we can see it, now also I'm going to add the move. Move is what's going to move it up and down, right? So I'm going to set move. This was button again, so change target, tooltip, initial state, and we need the y-axis and we need negative, so go like minus 10 pixel. That's good. And we need opacity to be 0%. So usually what I do here, now you see this could be covering, probably this is covering up, so the tooltip is still there. Opacity doesn't make it disappear completely from the HTML, so it's still there and it's still selectable. So what can happen is somebody will come here and this appears and the button isn't selectable and nothing happens because we have this transparent tooltip covering up the button. So we don't want this. To avoid having something like this, what we always do when we are animating something and we are making it, going from 0% to 100%, we also have to add a hide and show, which is a display none. And this is the same thing that we have here in the display, this same exact values. So let's go back to this guy, tooltip, yeah. So we need to set this to display none. Once it's display none, it's completely gone from our canvas, and from our HTML, so it's not going to come in contact, so we won't be able to come in contact with our mouse cursor. And I'm just going to arrange things here in a way that it kind of makes sense. So it's hide and show, then move, opacity makes sense. Now what we need is to animate. So it starts from here, move is up 10 pixels, opacity 0%, and now we need for it to start animate when somebody clicks on it. We'll add a new action here, but actually this time, well, I cannot select it, okay. So we'll start, obviously, the most important part is you have to start with a hide and show, because it's hidden right now, and if you don't do the first thing to show it, none of this guy is going to happen first. So first thing needs to happen that it's going to show. Basically take it back, put it back to original display setting, which was, I believe this was block. All right. Now we will do move and opacity. We're doing this on the same timestamp, so they sort of start at the same exact time. Move, that's correct. And we are returning, because it's already minus 10 pixels, we are just returning it to 0 pixels. We're not putting plus 10 pixels. 0 pixels is its original place, so we're just returning it there. As you can see, this outline went there. And we'll change the animation, make it perhaps 0.2, change the linear to easing out. And now next we're gonna do the opacity. And same thing here. Let's return it to 100%. Change these to same. When you do animations, usually it's good if you have like multiple things being animated, like an opacity and move, try to match exactly the same values of a duration and same values of easing, because you don't want to overcomplicate something for the browser, because it will use a lot more probably resources of the CPU for the browser to make this happen if you are making two different easing and two different durations for one item that has to be animated at the same time. So sometimes what can happen is I see some people have like Webflow websites that they have animations that are either lagging or a bit jerky or something like that, and usually happens because they are adding too many things in one place and then having them work in multiple different ways. Height show, opacity, move. This doesn't really matter, order between opacity and move. I think it's pretty much the same because it will happen at the same time at the same speed, so we can have it like this. So let's play this. Looks pretty good. So now what we need, so it does come out. We click on it, came out pretty good, right? But it's gonna stay like here, it's not gonna disappear. Clicking on it's not gonna help. So what we need is for it to disappear on its own. This is what usually happens with this kind of guys, with this sort of tooltips. So what we'll add is going to add a new action that's going to be disappearing, I would say, opacity, disappearing just with an opacity instead of moving it back up, and making it 0%. Duration, actually it could be 0.5. I like when it's slow in this case, and maybe easing out again. We'll see how that looks. But what we want is we don't want it to disappear right away, right? As you can see, it disappears, starts and disappears instantly. So what we need to do is add the delay right here on this same place. So it starts after these guys are executed, and then say 3 seconds later. Now the timeline shows that this happens at 00, and at 3:20 happens this. 3:20 because 0.2 is what these guys took, and 3:20 this happens. And let's see how that works. So you can see timeline is showing, it's delaying, and bam. Delaying, and bam. Yeah, I like this slow disappearance. Now, this is not enough because we did this. It disappears, but now this guy is still here, it's just disappearing in terms of opacity. So what we need to do is do the same thing, so it goes back to being at the height show, which is going to happen after this. Don't put it here, because if you put it here, it's going to make, it will happen same time as an opacity, and because height show doesn't really take much time, it goes from one state to another, it cannot be animated. So it will cut the opacity short, and you will even not see the animation of the opacity. So it needs to happen after this. So at the end, you will add hide show and put this to display none. And now let's give it a test. Shows, disappears, it's not here. Click again, appears. The only issue might be that, so as you can see, on the first time, it comes down, right? It's from the top and kind of slides down and then appears, right? But the second time when we do it, it appears right away. And that's because we didn't return it back to -10 pixel. We just made the opacity disappear, and it's now this initial state, which was -10 pixels. We didn't put it back. So right now it's disappeared, 0% opacity, but somewhere here instead of being -10 pixel out. So we need to add that as well right after the opacity is done. Move. We'll move it back up, -10. And I'll put 0 duration here because now it's already gone, but it doesn't appear, but it just does this in the background. So we don't really care that it's going to be fast or slow. And in reality, this can now be together. The move and the hide and show can be together because it just happens in the background. So first click, comes down, appears. Let's see, it's just gonna disappear, and now it should come down again and appear. There you go. Excellent. Save that. And we will publish this and give it a test. All right, so let's copy this to make sure the clipboard is empty. We'll click on this. It appears, something is up with it. Paste. Okay, this works. That's fine. Second time it works fine. Let's see again. Works fine, but it seems like there is an issue on the first time we do it. See, you get this weird, it doesn't animate properly, and it's not because of the video. This is happening on my side as well. Now the reason why is that happening is that because we are executing one JavaScript here, which is to copy this thing, and also we are animating as the second thing. So too many things are happening at the same time, which is probably clashing and creating, maybe using way too many resources and not being able to execute properly. So what we would do here, that we're gonna let that first JavaScript of the clipboard to work and then have these guys animate. Right now it's animating right at the 0. So we're gonna delay this a little so that JavaScript animates first and then this happens. So they are not, going there right at the same time. So to do that, we will just take that first guy and have these two 0.2. And now we have to do the same thing for this other two guys. You can use Shift Select or Control Select to apply the same thing to both of them at the same time. All right, so now it's just double check that the entire group is delayed by 0.2. Hide and show, move opacity, that looks all good. Let's give the final shot. All right, let's give it a test. Excellent. Let's see if the text is being copied. My email. Good. One more time. There you go. And that's how you create a copy to clipboard button with its own tooltip and animation.